In 70 AD, the armies of Rome breached the walls of Jerusalem. The city was overrun, its defenders cut down, and the temple set ablaze. Sacred objects were seized and carried off to Rome as spoils of war. This was no ordinary conquest. It was retribution. Over decades, the Jewish population had risen against Roman rule multiple times, and Rome resolved that suppression alone was not enough. The connection between a people and their land had to be severed completely. The Kingdom of Israel had already fallen centuries earlier. Now, Rome sought to erase even its memory. Judea was stripped not only of autonomy but of identity. Jerusalem was renamed Aelia Capitolina. The name Judea was removed from maps, replaced with Syria-Palestina. On the very ground where the temple once stood, a shrine to Jupiter was erected. Rome itself would eventually collapse, but the people it tried to erase endured beyond it and beyond every empire that followed. For 2,000 years, they existed without a state, without sovereignty, without land. They had been driven out by empires, Assyrians, Babylonians, Romans. They suffered under crusaders. Every force that sought their destruction has passed into history, yet they remain. They returned to the same land, the same city, the same wall, and once more called it Israel. No other people has achieved such a return. How could this happen? How did a small collection of tribes, settled on a narrow strip between desert and sea, produce a text that would give rise to 3 major world religions? Why did those who proclaimed "Thou shalt not kill" become among the most persecuted in history? And what changed when, after 2 millennia, they decided that words alone would no longer suffice and took up arms? This is Meditative History. I'm Vlad, and I use visual storytelling to bring the past to life. The narrative you're hearing, however, was written and verified with the guidance of a professional historian. Long before Israel, there existed a vast interconnected world stretching from Greece to Egypt. It collapsed so completely that even the ability to write disappeared in some regions. In the 13th century BC, 2 great powers dominated the Near East, Egypt and the Hittite Empire. Between them lay Canaan, a region of small city-states linked by trade and diplomacy, communicating through cuneiform script derived from Babylon. Then suddenly, this entire system unraveled. At the transition from the 13th to the 12th century BC, a series of disasters struck. What historians now call the Bronze Age collapse. The interconnected trade networks that sustained civilizations began to fail. Tin, essential for making bronze, could no longer be transported across long distances. Grain shipments halted. Weapons ceased to flow between regions. Drought and famine triggered a cascading breakdown. The Hittite Empire vanished. The Mycenaean world was destroyed. Egypt weakened irreversibly. Cities across Canaan were abandoned or reduced to ruins. Writing systems disappeared entirely in some places. Out of this devastation, a new people emerged. The group that would later be known as the Israelites. Their exact origins remain uncertain. Biblical tradition traces them to Abraham and an exodus from Egypt. Archaeological evidence suggests they were likely Semitic groups already in the region, part of the broader migrations during this chaotic period. They adopted local customs, language, and agricultural practices. Over time, they began to identify as a unified group. Their neighbors referred to them as Israel. By the early Iron Age, these tribes coalesced into a kingdom. The Bible attributes this to the reigns of Saul, David, and Solomon. Solomon later built the first temple in Jerusalem, dedicated to Yahweh. This structure became the focal point of religious life. After Solomon's death around 930 BC, the kingdom split. The northern kingdom of Israel formed around Samaria, while the southern kingdom of Judah remained centered in Jerusalem. Both worshipped Yahweh, but their practices diverged, and tensions escalated into hostility. In 722 BC, the Assyrian Empire conquered the northern kingdom. Its population was deported and dispersed, a deliberate strategy to prevent rebellion. The 10 northern tribes disappeared from history. Judah survived for another century and a half. Then, in 586 BC, Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar II destroyed Jerusalem and the Temple, and deported the elite to Babylon. This moment marked a profound transformation. Stripped of land, temple, and leadership, the exiled population faced a crisis of identity. In Babylon, they encountered an advanced civilization with deep literary and cultural traditions. Instead of assimilating, they began to preserve their own identity through writing. Oral traditions, laws, genealogies, and narratives were compiled into a cohesive body of texts. These writings, which would later form the Torah, were shaped and refined during this exile. They incorporated older traditions but also absorbed elements from surrounding cultures, adapting ancient Mesopotamian myths into a monotheistic framework. Stories of creation, floods, and heroic figures were reinterpreted through a singular divine lens. In 538 BC, Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon and allowed exiled peoples to return home. Some Jews returned to Judah, while many remained in Babylon, forming a lasting diaspora. Centuries later, Alexander the Great's conquests introduced Greek culture across the region. Some Jews adopted Greek language and ideas, leading to translations of sacred texts into Greek, the Septuagint. Others resisted, leading to revolts such as the Maccabean Uprising. Over centuries, Jewish communities spread across continents. They lived under various rulers, sometimes tolerated, sometimes persecuted. In parts of the Islamic world, they experienced periods of relative stability and intellectual growth. In Europe, however, they often faced discrimination, expulsion, and violence. In the late 19th century, Theodor Herzl advocated for the establishment of a Jewish state. Migration to Palestine began in waves. Following World War I, the region came under British control. In 1947, the United Nations proposed partitioning the land into two states. The State of Israel was declared. War followed immediately. Israel survived, but the conflict displaced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, a tragedy remembered as the Nakba. Subsequent wars reinforced Israel's position but deepened the conflict. Thousands of years ago, an inscription declared that Israel had been erased. History has repeated that claim many times. Each time, it has been proven wrong.